All right, everything's recording. So I'll try to keep an eye on attendees. Hopefully we got a few more joining us. Yeah, so I hope everybody has had a wonderful last couple of months since our last meeting. Today we'll review our agenda. The two main things are going to be the internal affairs and the police auditor report. Internal Affairs as delivered by Cindy Coleman. I don't remember your actual official title, Cindy, unfortunately.
Good evening. I'm the Professional Standards Manager at Eugene.
Professional Standards Manager. Thank you so much.
God, how'd you get that title? That's awesome.
We've seen Cindy before. I'm sure we'll see her again soon. And we have Leah Pritchard for the police auditor folks. You want to say a couple words about yourself, Leah?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Leah. My internet is unstable, so I apologize if there's an issue there. I'm the Deputy Police Auditor. I've been in the office for 10 years, and thank you for inviting me tonight.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. So those are the two main things on our agenda tonight. Tonight is mostly informational. Tonight is also an excellent opportunity to start thinking about our upcoming retreats and what sorts of issues we want to put on the next 2-year work plan. So usually these are held a little bit earlier in the year for obvious reasons. This has been a little bit delayed, but is everybody okay with the agenda as it is today? Anybody have any corrections or changes you'd like to make? Seeing none, we will run right into the liaison reports. Lindsay, do you mind if we start with you and then go to Amanda, hopefully giving Silver enough time to join us?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Foltz. I'm the liaison from the Civilian Review Board at the moment. So we've been very busy. The auditor's office has been very busy supporting us as well, I should say. I'm thankful for all the extra work that the auditor's office is doing right now. We have the community impact case that's looking at the police response to the protests from May 29th, 30th, and 31st that occurred earlier this year. And I know that a lot of people in the community are sort of anxiously awaiting us to review that case. So that's what we're doing now. That meeting will be held on Tuesday. I saw also, it looked like, I think the Register Guard and KEZI have featured that meeting's coming up. So I'm glad about that. So we'll be reviewing, we're kind of looking at those nights a little bit as a whole.
I gotta jump on. Take it easy.
So we'll be looking at those nights, there's like kind of a general arc to the narrative, and then specific allegations that were investigated over the course of those 3 nights. And we'll be discussing all those on Tuesday. I think that the opening memo said there was over 600 hours of video footage. Obviously, we are not reviewing 600 hours of video footage, but there are hundreds of hours of video footage that we're reviewing. So that's what I spend my evenings doing. So that's kind of where we are with that. That's the next big body of work that we have in front of us. And again, tune in on Tuesday if you are interested to see the conversation. I'm sure it will be robust.
Thank you, Lindsay. As I see, we've got more folks joining us in the attendees as well. And I see Anya has already raised her hand. So if you do have public comment, we will be taking those in a minute after the liaison reports. Please go ahead and raise your hand in the Zoom browser, and we will open that up here soon. Everybody's going to get a 1-minute public comment, yeah, we'll go from there. Next up on liaison reports, Amanda and then Silver.
Great. Thanks, Sean. So let's see, in Human Rights Commission, today is International Human Rights Day, so we have an event happening right now. So we're doing a screening of Healing from Hate. It's a movie about folks who were part of the white supremacist movement and then left that, and what that process has looked like for them. And we're having a discussion also with the filmmakers and some other folks too on our panel. If you want to go, and obviously you're here, so you're not there. We purchased a number of, they're sort of like tickets. I can't think of the word, but for the screening. So that I can send you the link to it if that's something that you want to watch. We've purchased those, and they can the movie can be watched at any time. So I can send that to Jeremy, and Jeremy can send that out if folks are interested in watching that later. Let's see what else. Just a couple of things that we're working on that are coming up. So our homelessness and poverty work group is working on some recommendations around making housing status a protected class. And if that's something folks are interested in, I can bring a more detailed update to the next meeting about that. And then our WeCU committee is working on some renaming of historical monuments, so doing some work on that. And then we have our MLK awards will be coming up in February, so I'll make sure to get those nomination forms out to you all once we finalize that, so you can nominate folks for that. And then on December 21st, we have National Homeless Persons Memorial Day, and our Poverty and Homelessness Work Group is working on an event for that as well. And we're still nailing down the details on that. So once that's finalized, I can send that out to you all as well. And then lastly, we did elections in Human Rights Commission last time. So Vice Chair Daniel Borson is replacing me as Vice Chair. So he'll be Vice Chair. And then I was voted in as Chair. So I'm Chair of Human Rights Commission now. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
Excellent. So let's do silver, and then after silver, we will do public comment. So if you haven't raised your hand and you'd like to give a public comment today, please do so, and I will call on you shortly. Silver?
Yep. So we had the subcommittee for the use of force yesterday evening, and some of the topics that were raised were the use of tasers, the use of spit hoods, some of the conversation around de-escalation techniques. A particular Supreme Court case that continued to come up was Graham v. Connor, and so I shared that with the text with the group. There was a discussion about military surplus, and there were some clarifying points that Chief was able to share with me regarding the Bearcats and their not being classified as militarized, and some more information about the 1033 program. And there was also a conversation around chokeholds, strangleholds, and what is sometimes called arm bars. And so I think some of the committee's recommendations are going to be put forward to the ad hoc committee as a whole for the next meeting, specifically regarding spit hoods and their use and when they're deployed, and if they're deployed, can they be that data be put into the report, sort of as we had the taser conversation when a taser is deployed, that is made a mandatory report. So we can look at the language behind the mandatory reporting for spit hoods as well. And we're also going to be looking at some of the, I'm not clear on what the committee's recommendations are for tasers, but we'll continue to look at that at the next meeting as well.
Okay.
That was it.
Thank you so much. So we are moving into public comments. After this, we will do commissioner comments. So we got public comments coming up. I'll have Anya first, and then David on the on deck after that. These are going to be 60-second comments. V, can you keep time for me? Excellent. So V will have the little flip card letting 30 seconds and when it's time to stop. Just as a reminder for anybody who hasn't given public comment before, we cannot take allegations of specific misconduct. Fortunately, we have Leah here who is ready to help out with that. That is a police auditor thing. So I'm allowing you to talk now.
Great.
Anya?
Yep. Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Was I saying your name right?
It's Anya.
Anya, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. My name's Anya Dobrovolsky. I'm a resident living by the fairgrounds. I just want to come and let you all know, since you help advise City Council on policy, that EPD was involved in the sweep of 120 unhoused people at Washington Jefferson Park last Wednesday. That is against CDC guidelines for COVID-19. I know a lot of city councilors are patting themselves on the back for all they're doing for the unhoused people. I do want to mention that the $15 million increase in EPD funding that you guys gave to EPD could have housed all of those people and then another 50 in permanent supportive housing. And just a last coda, in 2008, the city of Los Angeles was ruled against for sweeping their unhoused residents. They found that the courts found it that it was against the 8th Amendment. So I would like my tax dollars used differently. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Excellent. Next up, we have David Jackson. I'm going to allow you to talk now.
Hello, I first of all would like to welcome the newest members to the commission. I'm David Jackson. I've lived in Eugene 17 years. This is my fourth or fifth visit to the commission. So welcome a bunch of new faces. And I want to take stock of the very unique times that we live in, to have this many new commissioners coming on at a time that we have unprecedented political capital to make amazing changes in policing. I also want to applaud Chief Skinner for taking a challenging job in an extremely liberal environment that has more regulation than other jobs that would be available. And don't lose sight that Eugene is at the forefront of 21st century policing with many of the initiatives we already have in effect. I yield my time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up, we've got Rebecca Bradvika.
Thank you, Sean. I live in the Whitaker community and have lived in Eugene for over 47 years. And in that time, there has always been a problem with bicycle theft. What I'm seeing now is far worse than it has ever been before. And what really concerns me now is some frustrated, incipient vigilantism that is springing up as people lose their primary modes of transportation and significant forms of expenses. So I don't have any solutions. I see it largely methamphetamine driven. The week does not go by that I don't see at least one individual with more than one bicycle. So this is what I have to say. It's that people are starting to take matters into their own hands. That really concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That is all I am seeing in the public comments. I see a few more folks have joined us. We'll do commissioner comments now and transition away from public comments. Let's start with Silver, if you are available. I can skip to the next person too.
I am. I really don't have a lot of comments necessarily, but I do want to say it's important that I acknowledge that there was a recent shooting, and I acknowledge, I don't know what the conversation was before I got on. I do acknowledge that I am very grateful that the gentleman was not killed. And I do want to acknowledge that he is a person of color, and that these are the reasons why we're having the conversations that we are at the ad hoc committee. And I really hope that we can look forward to working with this commission and with the department to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen in the future. It can't happen. It just can't happen.
Thanks, Silver. Next up, we'll do Chantel and then Bonnie.
Hi, evening, everyone. I apologize for missing the last meeting. I was out of town on a family emergency, but I am glad to see you all. And I second what Silver says as well. These are scary times, and we need to get these policies right, and we need to take our time. So I'm excited to continue working with you guys.
Thanks, Chantel. Bonnie and then Dallas.
Okay, thank you for everybody that did public comment. Please feel free to email me anytime when you have concerns. My email is somewhere on the website. Also, just a few things that I'd like to bring forward for the future. I'm thinking about, okay, so somebody brought to my attention that within the past year, the city of Eugene police, apparently the way that drugs are measured was kind of off, scientifically speaking. So I'd like to get more information on that and kind of get that confirmed. So my understanding is that when you are measuring something, you have to tare something, and that means that you take the container and you account for the weight of that container and also the drugs. You can't count both of them together. So it's scientifically very strange, and I want to understand how things have progressed, hopefully. And apparently it's not required that pictures be taken of the measurement of the drugs. So I think that that's just, again, scientifically just doesn't make sense. It blows my mind. So we got to figure that out, because that's embarrassing. And I'm sorry, but it is. And the other thing is, and then I'd like to follow up with the deputy chief. So she said that she has information from her previous post on how to improve our domestic violence. So again, acknowledging the domestic violence that's been happening in the city. We need to kind of fast track that, it seems like, and especially with COVID, it's actually kind of late, I would say, but we should still be addressing that. Because according to a lot of articles that I've been reading online, COVID actually has increased the amount of domestic violence that has been happening. And apparently, according to the deputy chief, we're pretty bad here in Eugene. So hopefully that can be addressed. And then last point, sorry, I was also checking out our website, and it seems that the way to report domestic violence is kind of confusing on the website. It actually says, I'm not going to quote, but sort of quote, it says that if you, the online version of reporting a domestic violence issue, if you know who the suspect is, then reporting it online isn't the way to do it, which is really weird. So you have to do it via a phone call. And because of COVID, there's less privacy, which makes it harder to report the issue. So I don't know, I just think that that's kind of weird, and it shouldn't be worded that if you know who the suspect is, obviously this person's probably going to know who is beating them. Then I just think it's kind of confusing for anybody that's using the website. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Dallas and then Alan.
Hello, everybody. Basically, I just wanted to continue, and I will continue to bring up that, the state of downtown Eugene. I know that with this pandemic, business is hard enough downtown Eugene, working downtown myself and living downtown. I want to make sure we just don't make it harder by allowing unwelcoming type activities downtown to make it, where it's already hard enough, you're losing business that way. I don't want to be scaring people from coming downtown with elevated amounts of homelessness and so forth. I want to be part of the solution. And I know often, the presence of police and also the red hats, the downtown guides help. But a few times, even this week, I had to basically have people who were camped out right in front of the store, right smack, sleeping right at the doorway, right at around opening time. And that's just not what this commissioner would like to see when going to work.
Thanks, Dallas. Alan and then Jennifer.
I don't really have any comments or questions at this time. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thanks, Alan. Jennifer and then Ian.
Thank you, and thanks for the folks who came tonight to give public testimony. I also was very impressed with the deputy chief's presentation, her brief talk about domestic violence. And I too look forward to hearing more about her plans and you know, what we're going to do in the future around this area.
Thanks, Jennifer. Ian and then Lindsay.
Just wanted to say l'chaim to anyone who's celebrating the first night of Hanukkah. At the WCC, we're receiving grant funds from the Oregon Health Authority to do COVID-19 education outreach and engagement to the unhoused community, elders, and renters. We're also working with the University of Oregon to expand their testing capacity to community-based organizations, vulnerable community groups. And I wanted to make an offer to Jeremy and the chief and our officers who would like to get testing to work with the University of Oregon through their MAP testing program. And I'm more than happy to provide that information to Jeremy. It's what's expanding Lane County's testing capacity. And I think it's going to be a resource for our officers and our support staff to ensure that we have regular access to quick testing. Now it's gotten to the point where 4 days is the maximum, and I've received my results in less than 24 hours. So certainly want to provide that community resource to our officers and our support personnel who are ensuring that they're responding to our community's needs in a timely way.
Thanks, Ian. Lindsay and then Amanda.
Nice to see everyone. I don't have much to add other than I'll just acknowledge, like, Silver, I see a lot of you lately. You're doing the ad hoc committee, you're doing the subcommittee. I just want to like honor the work that you're doing. You're doing a lot. So I see you and thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
And that's it. Look forward to the meeting.
Thanks, Lindsay. Amanda and then V.
I don't have too much to say. It's nice to see everybody again and be here together again. I did have a number of human rights commissioners who've expressed concerns to me about the shooting that Silver mentioned. So it's something that Human Rights Commission is also concerned about and keeping an eye on. So hope to learn more about that as time goes on and if there's ways that we can be helpful. So, thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. V?
Hi, don't really have a whole lot to say other than that I found out recently that the new speed limit is 20 miles per hour in residential neighborhoods. Well, the officers are going to have a fun time giving out tickets in the city. I've seen a lot of speeders, particularly in the neighborhood I'm in. People are just driving like they're going to a gold rush or something, you know? So I know that there are signs you can order for free that you can, you know, prop up sign that you can put on the lawn and all that. The information on there are way too small. If you're driving and you're going by it, you're not going to see anything. You're just going to see 20 and that's it. Mm-hmm. So I hope that, you know, the new speed sign will be out soon so that people can, you know, buy it. And then I hope that there are consequences, you know, that the officers can, you know, maybe give out warnings and then proceed to issuing tickets. That's the only way people can learn. I learned it the hard way when I was back in San Francisco. You know, you get one ticket and you better learn. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, V. So I attended the belonging training put on by the city last month. I would encourage everyone, if you haven't signed up, if there's still spots to do so this December. I already got a feedback thing. These are, my understanding is fairly new endeavor by the city to open these up to commissions and neighborhood districts. So we have a large opportunity to you know, really show them what we need as commissioners that maybe differs from what employees need. So I plan on filling out the feedback form, and I'm hoping we can all help improve the training and expand it to include more folks. With that, let's move on to the chief's report.
Thanks, Sean. Let me know if you're having trouble hearing me. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues here at the house, but it's probably more attributed to the fact that I have two kids that are on about 15 different devices probably right now, and they're soaking up all my bandwidth. So a couple of things just before I get into any content that I always like to try, and if I can, when I hear a piece of information that's just absolutely false, I try to reframe it a little bit. EPD has not been gifted $15 million in their budget. What the young lady may be referring to is the Community Safety Initiative, which is what we are undergoing workshops on now to see where that money and how that money is going to be used for the entire community safety system to include homeless services and prevention services. So EPD is not the beneficiary of 15 million. So that's not accurate. As a matter of fact, this year I start trying to do the existing things that we're doing and trying to meet everybody's needs. And of the 178,000 people we serve, about $2.5 million in the hole to start every fiscal year. Well, to start this fiscal year, that is, some of that is attributed to about a 1% underspending target that the city has asked us to meet because of these tough financial times through COVID. Our general fund has taken a significant hit, and so we're trying to do as much as we can with less money today than we've ever had before. So I just thought I would kind of reframe that. I think the sentiment is solid with respect to wanting to take a look at how we fund things and alternatives and matching resource with need. And I'm the first one to tell you that a police officer is not necessarily the right resource for every need we have in the community. And so I'm open to those conversations and actually am well positioned to kind of move the needle on doing something pretty unique and creative here in the city, even above and beyond all the unique and creative things that we've already done. And if you've been watching the news or paying attention nationally, EPD and its relationship with Cahoots and some of the things that we've done with community oversight have been the envy of many jurisdictions across this country. I've spoken a lot in North America, quite frankly, about what we're doing here and how it's been a little bit different. So that's just really good work, and a lot of people are engaged in that meaningful work, and we continue to lean in and try to find out what that next level is. I kind of metaphorically say, other people's goal weight is our starting weight, and that's good. That's a good place to be. Other people would love to be at where we're at right now, but that doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. So we're moving that forward. The other thing that I heard that is really promising is the interest around domestic violence. Here's a little fun fact for you. The young lieutenant that built that domestic violence response team in Hillsborough is me. And so the deputy chief speaks fondly of that because she lived in that environment for so many years. But I built that DVRT and the capacity to serve our domestic violence victims back in the early 2000s, modeled after a program that was at San Diego PD, and then Salem PD actually was the first in the state to do that. And I spent a lot of time looking at what it meant to have victims of domestic violence wrapped in services earlier in the process, and how we shepherd them through this really tough time after they have been abused or are moving from the victim status to the survivor status, and how we help them do that. It can be really confusing for a victim of domestic violence. And so we coupled volunteers that would come out actually after domestic violence scenes were secured to particularly do aftercare for the victims. And we identified kind of elite investigators within the organization that could come in and do some of the really complex domestic violence investigations. One of the hardest things about domestic violence investigations sometimes, especially in family dynamics, is sometimes to identify the primary aggressor. And in other cases, it's really obvious, but in so many cases, it's really tough to find out the primary aggressor who holds the power in that relationship. And building a really deep bench on investigators that can understand how to do that can be really impactful for families that are trying to break that cycle of violence. So I look forward to, through the CSI, building a similar type of response in Eugene that will better serve our domestic violence victims. We've always been really good at investigating them, but oftentimes victims are left out. And we continue to see that even today, where we have domestic violence occurring and very little conversation is about the victim. and it's more focused on the investigation. So I'll look forward to that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to you, Silver brought up, we're in that kind of really awkward and uncomfortable waiting phase with the district attorney's office. I would just point out for anybody that's listening that once the district attorney's office assumes control of any officer involved shooting scene and their team is doing the criminal investigation on the officers, that all of the information is held by the district attorney's office pending her release of her decision, and then ultimately the video or any evidence that supports that decision. I expect that to be released on Monday. She's generally has articulated a 2-week turnaround time, which in the investigative world is actually fairly quick and fairly impressive that she meets that timeline. Even though it feels like a lifetime for people in the community. But I would expect on Monday that there will be a huge release of information, and it'll give people a more clear picture about what happened that day. And so hopefully that will continue to shape the conversations that we're having as we move forward and trying to do things a little bit differently. So look for that hopefully on Monday. I don't have that confirmed. It's just based on my experience with her, is she's been really good about the 2 weeks.
Chief, can I ask? Yeah. Can I ask Sure. if we can have a conversation as the police commission after that report's been released, even before next year's out?
Yeah.
Is that something that we could set up and have a conversation?
Our role is not really to review incidents. That is the Civilian Review Board's role. I think we can definitely have a conversation about the ramifications of it. I think it's our duty to talk about a lot of issues that it's brought up, though. I don't want to step on Lindsay's toes over at the CRB.
Not to make any not to make any judgment, but to have a conversation as the EPD, if that would be something that you would be willing to do and have invited.
Well, Silver, I would say, I'm always open to having those conversations. That point where the DA's office releases her information is kind of my jump off point where I can kind of get engaged again. And trust me, it's equally as frustrating for me. If any of you that know me know that I like to be engaged, and I'm never at a shortage of words. So this quiet time for me is tough as well. And so I'm happy to have that conversation. And there may be some opportunities through this investigation to look at maybe some policy adjustments that need to be made, because every incident that we have, and I'll use the May 29th, 30th, 31st community impact case. We're going to learn through that. We're going to learn about some policy adjustments we need to make through that. And if it hadn't been for us going through that time, because it was so unique, when was the last time we had an incident like that in the history of the city where your police department had to respond? So they did what the best they could at the time, and also recognizing that we maybe swung and missed on a few things that we need to learn from. One really good example of that is a directive that's being written right now by the deputy chief that I'm going to sign that immediately alters the way we use the 40 millimeter extended range impact weapon. As much as I love this police commission, I can't wait for, there's certain things that I just, as a leader, I can't wait for us to run through the police commission. So there's going to be an executive directive for me, that'll be kind of an interim directive until we get a chance to really take a look at it. That is going to be safer for this community. And from time to time, I have to do that. And so this is another one of those types of incidents for me, Silver, is that happy to have that conversation, and we can pick apart maybe some nuances of policy that maybe need to be adjusted. So I'm happy.
And being somebody who's on this ad hoc committee, and I know Macy would like this as well, just to have just a dialogue about what's taking place, and not necessarily, I don't want to flesh out anything. I don't want to make any judgments. I just want to have that conversation. As you heard last night, I really feel as though we can be adults about this conversation and take and kind of learn from it, and that's what I would like to accomplish from something.
Yeah, I can appreciate that so much. And I think that conversation is much more productive when all the information is kind of out on the table. Because as you can imagine, and it's not unique to this situation, but there's so much bad information out there. And it's just, and the space gets filled up by different narratives from different people, and it kind of takes on a life of its own. So it's important for everybody to be kind of starting from the same baseline of understanding based on the release of information. So that would be a really good time to do that, is after that release. So I'm happy to do that.
So I've got Alan on the queue next, and then V. I saw V's hand as well. Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the purview of this commission is police policy. So that incident, as it relates to policy and maybe changes to policy, is an appropriate way to frame it and have a context around that kind of conversation about maybe there's something that we need to do differently or not. But that could be the mindset about how we approach that. I think would be very appropriate.
Trust and legitimacy as well is under our purview. Sweet. Do we have any more pressing questions, or are we ready to move on to the internal affairs report? Looks like we are ready for you, Cindy, to sweep us off our feet.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I've put together a presentation that is really a high-level overview of the internal affairs statistical report that I believe Jeremy probably provided you in the packet. And of course, I'll leave it up to you if you want to wait to the end or if you want to ask questions as we go. So let me share my screen. Do you guys see that okay?
It's loading in for me. Yeah, there it goes.
Okay. Let's see. So and remember, this is 2019, and we've almost had another whole year of cases and investigations. So this data, I apologize that it's as old as it is. And if you have any questions, just let me know. But for 2019, we had Sergeant Jason Barrett as our primary IA sergeant, but Sergeant Williams, who you know very well through his policy development work, also was sort of our backup sergeant, and he conducted a few investigations as well. Then we have Rick Weber in our office. He's the program coordinator, and myself. The contents of the investigation or the annual report go over the internal affairs investigations, as well as incident reviews, supervisor actions. We have a little information in there on our vehicle accidents and damage, vehicle pursuits, some use of force information, arrest data, recommendations, and lessons learned. So overview of stats. This just shows a comparison for 2019 compared to the last couple of years. So we had 32 allegations of misconduct. 4 of those were classified as allegations of criminal misconduct. Incident reviews, pardon me, 400 supervisor actions. Those are the service complaints, policy complaints, and inquiries. That covers minor performance issues, questions about maybe something that happened, or policy complaints, which would be, there may not be a complaint against an individual employee, but a community member has some concerns about the policy and how we provided that service. 340 commendations.
I do have a question on that. And it's just because I'm colorblind and can't tell the difference between the left and the right one. Which one is the far left one, the IA investigations?
So the 32, this one right here,
yeah,
that's IA investigations. Those are the formal investigations assigned to an IA investigator.
Sweet.
So of those 32 formal investigations, this is how they were, the major classification as decided by the police auditor. 14 were classified as conduct, 4 use of force, 9 performance, 1 discrimination, 2 constitutional rights, and 2 conformance to laws. So again, of those 32 cases, you can see that we had an equal number of internal and external complaints this last year. And of those pardon me, internal complaints, 9 of those were sustained, and 6 of the external complaints were sustained. So a total of 15 complaints were sustained last year. This shows, again, we're still talking about those 32 allegations of misconduct. 1 was administratively closed. 4 were dismissed for outside jurisdiction, and 1 was dismissed other. The auditor has the authority to dismiss complaints at intake for various reasons, and it could be that the complaint involved someone other than a Eugene Police Department employee, or for timeliness or things like that. 1 employee was terminated in probation. 1 was resigned. That shows our 15 sustained. We had 2 unfounded, 5 within policy. This 1 pending actually has been resolved. It wasn't at the time this report was prepared, but that employee no longer works at the police department. So just a reminder for everyone, out of those 32 allegations of misconduct, there could be multiple employees named as well as multiple allegations of misconduct. So this chart represents the individual allegations of misconduct in those cases, which were a total of 50. So 33 actual allegations were sustained. This represents by the classification of those complaints, how the adjudications were meted out. So again, you can see that in the performance category, that's where we really had a number of sustained performance cases. We also had 11 in the conduct area as well. Incident reviews. Incident reviews is a category of investigation that we started in 2016. What we found is that sometimes the auditor's office needed a little additional information before they could make the determination it needed to be classified as an allegation of misconduct. So incident reviews are assigned to the IA investigator, and they include any investigative step short of interviewing the named employee. They can provide the auditor with the information that they need to help finalize that classification. Sometimes incident reviews are reclassified to an allegation of misconduct. If so, they're going to be showing up in those other numbers. These 14 were investigated, and then in consultation with the auditor, they were closed out without further investigation.
So I have a question about, you said you close them, you do the investigating short of actually interviewing the employee. Is that because interviewing the employee is largely unnecessary, or is it because the union has?
It would require us going through that formal allegation of misconduct route, noticing the employee. The cases that are closed as an incident review, that means the auditor got the questions answered that they needed to determine an allegation of misconduct wasn't in fact appropriate or necessary. The way that, so it has actually been a really good tool, I think, for both the auditor's office and our office, because it's a fairly efficient way to get the answers that we need without going through a full internal affairs investigation, stress on the employee, as well as the time for Internal Affairs Office, Auditor's Office, and chain of command. So in 2019, you can see that we had an equal number of cases that were conduct and use of force related. Supervisor actions. This is really where the big body of work is for our department, not necessarily internal affairs, but for first line supervisors in general. These are complaints that come in that the auditor classifies as either service complaints, policy complaints, or inquiries. And they're generally assigned to the first line supervisor for investigation and follow up with the employee and with the citizen. 52% of those were classified as service level complaints or service complaints, and the rest being policy complaints and inquiries.
For folks who might not be super familiar, can you talk a little bit more about the difference between a service complaint and a policy complaint?
You bet. A service complaint is generally the citizen is complaining that it could be performance, it could be lack of service delivery, it could be timeliness of getting a police dispatch to their call for service. It could be really courtesy, performance, service level, those kinds of things. Things that don't rise to the level of an allegation of misconduct or serious performance. Policy complaint, it's a complaint not about the employee. They're not focused on the employee was rude or anything like that. It's really that I know it's a policy, but I don't like your policy and I'd like to talk to you about that or understand it better. Does that answer your question on that?
It does. I have one more follow-up, which is how do policy complaints, is there some mechanism for this body to get our eyes on them as well? Because it seems like something we should be looking at.
Well, perhaps there would be. The policy complaints, traditionally, we've handled them a little bit differently, but lately they generally are assigned to our policy development sergeant, which will be incoming Sergeant Nelson, unless there's a subject matter expert that is more appropriate and more informed to handle that policy complaint. So it is possible that we could get some flow of information to your group. This Sergeant Nelson would be informed to do that. If that's something that you guys would like, we could figure out how to at least talk about themes with you at least.
Yeah, I think Kyle has largely done it sort of at his discretion, which has proven good, but I think there's a hunger for more of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is just showing a representation.
Cindy, can I interject real quick?
Of course.
I'm sorry. Sean, a really good example of this is when I make a decision that this community doesn't like, it comes in as a policy complaint. For instance, one of the biggest policy complaints we've had that the auditor's office was ready to disown me, even more than they usually are, is when I tried to pull EPD out of the illegal camping world and we weren't enforcing illegal camping in certain areas. We got a ton of what we would call policy complaints around me enacting that policy. That's a good example of where many of those policy complaints are coming from, is when I make a decision to back EPD out of something that members of the community don't agree with. And so that's going to be a little bit different than where the police commission can kind of insert themselves, because really it's more of an executive directive more than anything else. So that might be an example of one of those policy complaints.
Yeah, I think knowing that would be helpful as well. Thank you, Chief.
So again, this next chart just shows that it illustrates the kind of rise that we've seen in all three categories of inquiries, policy complaints, and service complaints. 2019 was a particularly busy year. I'm sure that Leah would agree in terms of citizen complaints. So out of those service complaints that we just talked about, the auditor does subclassify them to give us a better understanding just in general where those complaints, what we're talking about there. And 67% in 2019 were service level, or not service level, but performance. The service level would be the complaint where it could be they didn't get an officer dispatched at all, or it took too long for them to get there due to usually due to call load. And then there was 12% were courtesy. Vehicle crashes and vehicle damage.
Oh, sorry, what was performance? Could you define performance? Did you already do
Performance?
That?
Yeah. Performance it's really a variety of concerns that might be brought about an individual employee's performance in that contact. It could be a citizen feeling like they didn't do something they should have done, or they did something they shouldn't have done. It's really kind of a broad, it could be a driving complaint. It could be really, there's a lot of things captured under that performance category. But what that means is that it didn't rise to the level of a serious performance that would have been investigated as an allegation of misconduct.
I've got Ian with a question as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean. When I was going through the report, I noticed that y'all regularly intersperse stats in 3-year increments. I was wondering if that was kind of pro forma for policing generally or EPD specifically, because usually when I see trend analysis, it's over, decade periods like hydrology, these are 20, 50, 100-year windows. And so I was wondering if it was something to save space, or this was something which was normal for these reports specifically, or something that the chief was asking for. Just being so new, I was wondering if you could kind of sunshine a little bit why we have 3-year analyses versus something more like 10 or 30.
Generally speaking, I can tell you that our reports have evolved over the years where we've done it differently. But the last couple of years, I was asked to pare it down to just 3 years of comparison. So that's why. That was generally decided that would be desirable.
Why?
And I think Bonnie asked why that was. Or...
That was something that came from a previous chief.
Okay. And then I saw Chantel had another question.
Okay.
I was assuming, hi Cindy, maybe that the years were because didn't you guys change the policy in 2016 to include different types of reports? Could that be why?
Leah nodding.
2016, we added the incident reviews, but this the report, the specifics of the report and how we've presented and what information is presented has evolved over the years.
Excellent. Lindsay, did I see your hand? Okay, just got to double check. Thank you, Cindy.
So just really briefly about vehicle incidents. The department tracks anytime there's any kind of damage to any of our fleet vehicles for any reason. So that's the number that you're seeing here. These are not all 62 actual crashes, but they do include crashes, both at fault, not at fault, as well as damage by citizen just throws a rock at a car or something like that. Anytime our vehicles are damaged, we track that. This just shows the at fault, not at fault compared to the different divisions. You can see most of them happened in patrol, and that makes sense. They're the ones driving the most. But we also had some in our investigations division, operations support division. And in 2019, we had 6 involving cahoots volunteers. And this just shows you, for some comparison, how many miles driven in the last 3 years. Vehicle pursuits. We had 4 in 2019, and 1 was an agency assist, 2 were stolen vehicle, 1 was suspicious criminal behavior. And it remained consistent from 2018. We had changed our policy a while back that dramatically changed or restricted the vehicle pursuit policy. You were probably very involved in review of that policy and those changes. Use of force. So the use of force incidents show the individual incidents of use of force. There were 146 in 2019. I believe it was 214 employees were involved. So the way that we're currently tracking the data, you could have, similar to the IA investigation, you could have more than 1 employee in on use of force incident, employ different levels of force. The factors listed were active resistance being at the top with 53%, attempt to flee 17, ominous resistance 10. 90% of the incidents resulted in arrests. If there wasn't an arrest, that was usually due to no criminal intent due to mental illness, or folks may have been transported to the hospital for mental health treatment. Average age of the offender was 37.
I can already see some questions for folks. What
Oh, okay.
ominous resistance is, and then we'll get to, okay, Jennifer and then V. Is that your question? Okay.
I'm going to leave it to perhaps Kyle Williams to answer the definition of what ominous resistance is. That's a good question because I think it has actually come up in our policy before.
Yeah, and we talked about some of the definitions. That actually isn't in there. Ominous is going to be where, and I would have to look up to get you an actual definition of what the exact definition is. But essentially, where someone isn't physically resisting, but that's where they can be through body language or threats or verbal, where they are indicating in a way that they are not going to be cooperative in the process of an arrest. And so it's a little more open-ended than some of the others, because you have people that are actually fighting you at the time, and then you have the people that are conducting themselves in a way that leads you to believe that there's going to be resistance, that would then articulate the ability to use force. Sergeant Nelson, did I feel like I kind of just flung that out there and not very clearly? What do you think about that?
I'm not going to be able to help you much on that one without looking it up, to be honest with you. I think I would have done the same.
So Amanda, I assume you've got a follow-up question on this, because I do as well.
No, mine's not to this, it's the ominous.
All right. Then let me come right back to you. So it sounds like ominous resistance is, by its very nature, an escalation from words or attitude to actual force. How is that outlined in our de-escalation policy?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Sean.
So it says factors leading up to force. Ominous resistance is not active resistance, so it is It's like words and attitude, general bearing, attitude.
And conduct. If I step back and take a fighting stance and put my hands up in front of me and say, yeah, come and arrest me.
Okay.
That clearly gives me the ability to use some level of force on this person. And it may be potentially, depending on how it unfolds, the potential of a taser or pepper spray or something else, to avoid a physical confrontation where people will obviously get hurt. And so the de-escalation policy doesn't specifically talk about levels of resistance, but that's where each policy then has an explanation of when that tool can be used and how it can be used and how that fits in.
Excellent.
So
yeah, I think that's a much clearer picture of what ominous resistance
Yeah,
looks like to me.
And it's a pretty wide, I mean, in what we're collecting, the data we're collecting here, this isn't how we're going to talk policy-wise, but we've got to kind of lump the leading factors into different categories. And so kind of separating that a little bit from what the policy language is, as opposed to just sort of understanding the general circumstances around force. I wouldn't say it totally ties together completely clearly, because there's more detail on the policy side.
Yeah, thank you for that clarity. Amanda?
Yeah, I think it was on the previous slide where there was the list of the use of force incidents over the last 3 years, and it looked like there was a pretty, thank you. The pretty big decline over those 3 years. I was just wondering if someone could speak to like how and why that happened.
Yeah, I think we may have some slides that address that a little later, and there's more detail of our trend analysis in the full report. Let's see if I can get you to.
Yeah, I can wait too if it's coming up.
Yeah, well, for example, one of the things where you'll see a difference is for taser deployment, our use increased by 20. So even though we had less total use of force incidents, we had more taser deployments, but the effectiveness of the taser deployments increased compared to 2018. 43 were deemed effective, 17 ineffective. Now, typically you're going to see where there was either too far away, or the probe spread, or their clothing didn't allow contact, and 11 were listed as limited effectiveness.
I will also say that for 2019, I believe taser display was not counted as a use of force, whereas in previous years it had been. So that might also be playing into it. Ian?
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate you sharing this, Cindy. In the report too, it talks in some of the trend analysis about kind of over the last 3 years. And so I'm wondering too, again, I have a real knowledge deficit here, but climate change, something that you need to have hundreds and thousands of years of data in order to establish trends. Is 3 years, was that just something arbitrary by the chief? This is the amount of time that we're using to show trends? Because to me, it seems like a very small number of years in order to establish a trend line. But perhaps I'm missing something. Are these data chosen within 3-year time frames because of some established policy, or is that just, again, something that was arbitrarily chosen?
I think Jeremy might have a follow-up to this, if you don't mind him stepping in, Cindy.
Not at all.
And then I saw your hand, Dallas, so I've got you on the list.
The questions regarding trend analysis, I have the benefit of coming from the crime analysis unit prior to filling this role. And there's, so back in 2013, we went through a major RMS conversion. And the way that the data was tracked was very different. Now, this is a different database, but what happened was the next year, we were learning in the system in 2014. And what happened is it largely impacted the way that the data, so the data read, so you couldn't compare 1 year to the previous, or from pre-conversion to post-conversion. So the first time we could actually have a trend, or you can't have a trend with two. So the first time we could have a trend was when we had 3 data points, was the feeling. So that first report, if you're thinking if 13, the conversion happened in the middle of 13, 14 was essentially considered thrown out as bad data. 15 was our first good year. So 15, 16, and 17, that was the first time we actually had 3 data points to show a trend. So when we did that, we didn't want to be showing 5 points in this database, 3 points in this database, 7 points in this database. So they just kind of streamlined it, went to 3 for everything. And I think what you're seeing here is just kind of a remnant from a couple of years ago. Because if you think about it, a 3-year trend from being 2015, 16, and 17, we're now looking at 2019 data. This is just 2 years later. So that could very well have been the reason why the decision was made to go with 3 data points, because we had 3 data points across the system to be comparable, to have a kind of a set format for the entire police department, regardless of which database we were working out of. Does that kind of make some sense?
Appreciate you sharing that context, Jeremy. I worry making decisions sometimes, policy decisions based on incomplete data. But this to me gives a lot of history for maybe what was informing just kind of doing analysis and showcasing in the report, because that's what the department had post the database shift in 13.
Right. The other thing to remember is we're still showing the data from the previous years. You just have to go back to previous reports. So that's still public information. And Cindy's done a beautiful job of creating reports in years gone by. They're completely available to you. So we can still use those if we want to use those to actually make recommendations for policy, if that's going to be helpful. It's just, that's where we got into this 3 data point format. So
thank you. I think I saw Dallas's hand as well.
Yeah, I just want to go on the record for saying that the 3 years is not enough. I don't think I think that you need to go a little deeper than that for our own knowledge in seeing stuff. I mean, I wouldn't take a corporate job if I only knew 3 years of results. I need to go a little bit deeper than that. Now, I'm not asking that we go backwards so much, but maybe we can at least, as we start going forward, keep what we've already looking at, and then you really start seeing a trend. And then it happened a couple of times, and we just got to be careful on this. When we talk about this active resistance, attempt to flee, and this ominous resistance, here's the problem. That active resistance is clear. Got it. That attempt to flee is clear. Got it. Now, just from my life, that 10% is very dangerous when it's not really clear when we talk about this ominous resistance. So either A, if that is an umbrella, maybe break that down to some examples of what that is when that's presented. Because if not, it leads to me, it's just a gray area, and we need to try to keep this thing as black and white as possible.
We could definitely take a look at, so these are the drop downs that sergeants currently have available to them when they're completing a use of force report into the database. And so we can definitely take a look at, should we change what those drop downs should be? But this is a great example, though. I just will point out that every time we make this kind of a change, even if it's a great change and it's advisable to do it, then we start losing our comparable data, trend data, because things are tracked differently. And that has been something that we have dealt with over the years, is some of that consistency. But I think overall it's better to get it right and do it right, and then you can move forward rather than keep it if it's not clear and it's not tracking.
And 90% as far as that is looks like to me is good. I just think it needs to be a better breakdown of that 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, thank you very much. Cindy, if you'd like to continue so we leave time for Leah.
You bet. I'll go over this really quickly. We also track our canine deployment in this database. Again, this is not just the apprehensions, but when they actually are used to track and apprehend, not their actual deployments in the field, I should say. In 2019, we increased to 11 of them. All were deemed within policy. And again, these were the listed reasons for those individual cases. So these use of force types are the 6 most common that are only that are depicted. We have other ones, but these are the ones that are at the top of the list and most commonly used. And it shows that control holds have gone down slightly, but our focus blows, knee strikes, and taser have gone up last year compared to 2018. But tasers, interestingly, even though they went up from 18, they kind of leveled back off to closer to what we found in 2017. Just a little bit on arrests, just as to put this in perspective, the arrests that were made in 2019 and compare it to the reportable uses of force in 2019. This just is an illustration over the last 3 years, kind of our use of force by our average numbers of use of force per month were 12 in 2019. Our complaints, our average rose to 38 a month, and our commendations were about 28 a month for 2019. Commendations, 65% of the commendations were from an external source, citizen commendation. 35% were internally generated. Some of those are our annual award ceremony. Those commendations are noted in there as well. They're included in that 35%. Email seems to be the most common way that people let us know what they appreciated about our service. Commendation themes, these really haven't changed too much over the last few years. They're pretty consistent. They appreciate our tactful, compassionate, caring communication, efficiency and professionalism. We did receive in 2019 some additional feedback and praise related to the community outreach response team presence in Washington Jefferson Street Park and downtown, as well as the street crimes unit received a lot of praise and acknowledgement for their work in 2019. Lessons learned. Every complaint that we get, whether it's classified as an allegation of misconduct or a service complaint, we track sort of the outcome and if there was a performance issue. And so we do track that and try to learn from every case. Driving complaints are still kind of a common theme of complaints that we get. And so we are always looking for ways to improve and to remind officers that to model safe and courteous driving. And again, this comes out of the at-fault vehicle accidents to make sure that they have a clear path of travel, things like that. Performance. I think Bonnie had asked earlier, examples of performance issues could be just a reminder to check your email and respond to voicemail timely, complete and thorough police reports, de-escalation techniques. Again, that is something that if we see a deficit there, we will pass that on to employees. And then, of course, just the investigative information gathering skills and managing perceptions of their actions.
So I assume there's also a higher tier of de-escalation complaints, because it seems strange that there would be service level, like de-escalation is important enough that.
Well, what that means is that in those, there could have been a complaint that wasn't classified as an allegation of misconduct. It didn't rise to that. However, it doesn't mean that we didn't notice an area of improvement. Okay. So an employee could have been coached about, here's something that you could consider to have made this a better contact. So
even if everything went well, like even if it ended well, it's still an opportunity for it to have gone better.
Sure. We're always looking for those lessons learned on these cases. Training, just a reminder that our training staff provides training on emergency vehicle operations, pursuit policy and review, forcible vehicle stops, and boxing in techniques, defensive tactics. And again, in every defensive tactics training scenario that is offered, de-escalation is woven into all of those scenarios and reinforced. And critical skills training were some of the highlights offered last year, or 2019, yeah. And this is just a recap of some of the highlights of the policies that were revised in 2000 or issued in 2019. Search and seizure. Well, I don't have to read them. You guys can see them. Are there any questions? I know that I'm trying to, Lee is due to come up here next. Any questions about the presentation or?
Yeah, so we've got one from Lindsay.
Okay.
This was just in the written report. I realize there's so many things I don't know, so thank you for the report. I learn something every time. I realize I don't know what is the difference between an arrest and a physical arrest. I assumed that all arrests were physical, and they are apparently not. So can you help me out?
Yes, I'll give you my understanding, and then if it's deficient, I'm sure that one of the officers will correct me. Someone can be arrested and just be given a citation in lieu of custody. So they're not actually taken into custody, put in the car, and lodged at the jail. That's still an arrest. So that would be the difference between an arrest and a physical arrest. Physical arrest for purposes of this is lodging or putting in the back of a patrol car and transported to the jail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Cindy. I'm not seeing any other questions. We kind of peppered them throughout, but thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I think
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious, under the use of force, 10% of people don't get arrested? What does that mean? Is that they just get like did they get one of those, what do you call them, citations in lieu of custody or what?
No, what that means is that an officer didn't charge them. It was probably that they were exhibiting mental health issues where they were either transported maybe to the hospital for mental health treatment, or they were not charged because they didn't feel like they had the elements of the crime there due to mental health issues.
Yeah, excellent. So I just saw Chief Skinner's saying once we're done with the staff, you're allowed to enjoy some brief time to yourselves. And I think I think we're done with you, Cindy, for now. Oh, you're still muted.
I'll stay on and listen to Leah's presentation.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Leah, if you want to take this away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for staying, Cindy, because I'm sure we'll have some overlap. Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. I have some slides, but I will lose your faces once I go to the slides. So I wanted to stay here for a second. Thanks for inviting me. I don't think I've ever given an annual report from the previous year on Human Rights Day before. We try to make it a little earlier in the year. Just has been a big year. And to Counselor Zelenka and Counselor Ye, I did just give you this presentation a few weeks ago, so I'll try to make it not very repetitive. I changed it up just a little, just for you guys. So I'm gonna try to share my screen now. All right.
We
Can you guys see that? See my beautiful background? All right. I will try to get it to slideshow. It doesn't want to go. There we go. Oh, kind of. You guys, it's totally worked beforehand. Okay. I will go. Oh yeah, there we go. The beginning. Okay. So since this group has had a lot of changeover since the last time I reported to you all, I thought I'd go over a little bit about what our office does, just as an intro. So we are one of 3 pillars of community oversight in Eugene. As you know, your group, Police Commission, looks at Eugene police policy. Our office is a civilian office that oversees the complaint process, and I'll go into more of what we do in the next slides. And then the Civilian Review Board reviews our work and sort of therefore that of IA as well. We are independent of the executive branch of city government. We are established in the city charter, and our office reports directly to council, not to city manager, not to the police chief. Neither our management nor our funding overlap with EPD. I should also say I have a similar issue to Chief Skinner in that I have 2 children who may be jumping on devices or putting on movies at any time. So wave, I don't know, something if I go off. We are staffed entirely by civilians, and we are the central intake point for all complaints against Eugene police employees. So the complaint process starts with intake and classification. Like I said, we're the intake point for all complaints. So that's from the community and from within the department. The auditor has a sole authority to classify, and those are the classifications you just saw from Cindy. I think our numbers sometimes look a little different just because she included the allegations of criminal conduct with allegations of misconduct. So we report things a little bit differently, but we share a database and are reporting the same numbers. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. I looked at everything and did additions so I could match it up. Of course, I don't have that worksheet with me, but we'll figure it out. Sorry, investigations and monitoring depends on how it's classified. So as Cindy said, there are internal affairs investigations, which are allegations of misconduct. In those investigations, we collaborate with the investigator to talk about investigative steps and make sure everything gets covered. We participate in interviews with people from the community, with witness officers, with the involved officers. We're there for all of that. And then for supervisor actions, which are those minor misconduct, service complaint type things, we review a closing memo from the supervisor who interacted with the reporting party and the officer. And if we think that there's more that needs to happen, we can send that back. Generally, they've done a pretty good job and we can close it out. When there is an internal affairs investigation, the next step is called adjudication, which is where the chief has the ultimate authority to adjudicate these, and that's where he determines whether the alleged behavior happened or not, or was a violation of policy. So our participation in all of that is we confer with the employee supervisor, so we know what each person believes. Sometimes we convince each other, sometimes not. Sometimes we just agree. And then we each write a memo to the chief. So our office will make a recommended adjudication as to whether it should be sustained, which means the behavior happened and it is a violation of policy. There could be within policy, which is the behavior happened, but it appears to not violate policy. Often I will include a memo that talks about policy recommendations. So, just so you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm at these meetings every month. And then they can also be unfounded, which is the behavior didn't occur. And there's also insufficient evidence, which is available if the investigation wasn't able to find enough evidence to determine whether it violated policy or not. The next step is corrective action or discipline, which our office is not a part of at all. EPD works with the City Employee Resource Center to get that sorted out. We contact the reporting party, not generally if they were internal, but for community reporting parties, we contact them. Every closing letter lets them know what happened in the investigation. We include information on how to request that the CRB would review their case. And of course, if the CRB has already determined that they will be reviewing that case, then we let them know when that's going to occur and how they can attend that meeting, whether in person or over Zoom. And then the Civilian Review Board, when they receive the file, they get the entire investigative file. That's body-worn video, in-car video, radio traffic, anything that was used in the investigation, the CRB members get to look at. They review that investigation in a public meeting, which can be tricky with public records law, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And then I just wanted to mention there is always the community impact case option. As Lindsay said earlier, we are finishing up one of those right now. The determination of whether something is a community impact case occurs much earlier in this process, but it felt better to stick it in here because that's where the CRB members can offer input into the adjudication of an investigation.
So I have a few questions to jump off with right off the bat. So when the auditor and IA disagree on something, is there any record of how discipline is actually administered and which recommendation was followed, or if both were ignored? I suppose.
Okay, so it's interesting. IA actually at EPD, and every department does this differently, but at EPD, internal affairs are the fact finders and they don't offer recommended adjudication. So basically the complete investigative file goes to the employee's direct supervisor. So if it's a patrol officer, right, it goes to that patrol sergeant. And then Mark, my boss, talked to the patrol sergeant, and then we each make recommendations. EPD side, the sergeant makes a recommendation that goes to the lieutenant, that goes to the captain, that goes to the deputy chief, that goes to the chief. It's a very long line. My line is just me or my boss, which is a little simpler. But yes, there is a record. So if I disagree with the chain of command, both of those are recorded in our database. Those memos are linked in the database. And then the final adjudication that the chief determines is the final adjudication that's in the database, that what Cindy just reported and what I will be reporting later in this process, that's the chief's decision. And then actually in our annual report, our appendices include every single complaint we received over the course of the year. And we divide that up into, so Appendix A is always allegations of misconduct. And that table includes what the chain of command recommendation was, what the auditor's recommendation was, and what the final adjudication was.
Right. So that might be a question for Chief, if he's able to join us right now, is whether in your disciplining you try to split the difference, or how that sort of goes, and how you're informed by both halves of this.
Yeah. One point of clarification is the auditor's office does not recommend discipline. That solely resides within my office, and ultimately so if I have when I have two sides of an argument, it's at the adjudication level, on whether it's sustained or within policy. But on the discipline level, you do not have a second opinion, and some of that is what's important to note is in in a collective bargaining environment and an interest arbitration state, that resides with me, because then if it goes to grievance and arbitration, there's a lot of vulnerability, civil vulnerability, and that would be civil vulnerability within the police department, as opposed to spreading that around to the auditor's office or any other body. So,
okay. So I saw Silver's hand, and then I think I have a follow-up question as well. Silver?
You answered it, Chief.
Then my sort of follow-up question is sort of how do you figure out who to believe?
Well,
I'll how do I figure out who to believe? With respect to a decision from command versus a decision from the auditor's office. The good news is, I don't know, Leah, how many times has this happened in the 3 years that I've been here? Once, where we
Not a
disagree?
lot.
Yeah, maybe once or twice, maybe.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's been more times where I've disagreed with command and gone the auditor's way than I've disagreed with the auditor and just gone command's way.
I think that's what we want to hear. At least that's what I want to hear.
So it's at least what I can tell you, Sean, is that based on just my recollection, it's pretty balanced. Most of the time, we all are in agreement. The investigation is done so well that we're all in agreement. And in the few times that we're not in agreement, it's pretty balanced between both. And I would anticipate maybe having a few more of these adjudications not be in alignment with each other, which will be incumbent on me to look at the totality of the circumstances and read the policy, and in some cases there may be some policy recommendations that come out of that, because I think what you'll see at the community impact case this next week is a situation where technically it wasn't a violation of policy, but doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't need to be changed, and we need to be doing something different. So
sweet. So I see Lindsay's hand, and thank you for that concise and thorough answer, Chief.
And just to be clear, the CRB gets all of those adjudication or recommendations. So we can see all the way through the chain of command. We can see then what the chief does. We can see what the auditor does. Just in case anybody's curious, that's part of the information that we get. So it doesn't happen in a black box. Like, we get to see how that goes through that whole process.
Excellent.
And I should also clarify that because our office is not involved in discipline, there is the CRB, and that is the only information that ever gets redacted from CRB files is what the ultimate discipline was.
Sweet. Chief, did you have something to add, or did Leah take care of it?
No, I'm good. I just was going to point out that if Lindsay gets her way, I'll be attending CRB meetings to explain myself every now and again.
I love it when I get my way. I won't argue with that.
Sweet. So I see Bonnie has a question as well.
Is there a review process for the discipline that's given?
Not through our office. Chief can probably speak to grievance and arbitration better than I can.
I missed the first part of the question, Bonnie. Can you ask it again?
Is there a review process, or does anybody review the discipline?
So so when we have recommended discipline, and that recommended discipline comes up through the chain of command, oftentimes the review process involves our HR department that will look at other similar types of behavior and make sure that when we're recommending discipline, that it's consistent with other types of behavior we've seen, so it doesn't look disparate. To include whether it's a first-time offense or multiple offenses, or if it's escalating, or in fact, we need to take a look and see, has this person been disciplined before? And we go through kind of a progressive model of discipline where based on the action, we try to categorize it the best we can, but then subsequent similar actions might elevate that up to and including termination. So we engage our HR department pretty heavily in that to make sure that we're at least recommending discipline that's really consistent.
Naivasha, did you have something to add as well? Or did I just see movement? Okay. Yeah, please. Thank you, Leah. I did have one more question. Sorry, and that was Cindy mentioned that a lot of complaints were dismissed at the outset because they're not about EPD at all. Is there a way where, I guess, how much time and effort would it take to, at the very least, track where those complaints are coming from? Because even if it's about Springfield or even if it's about private security, it has a real impact on how Eugene's population feels about EPD as sort of one lump sum.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of overlapping law enforcement agencies in this town, and we are the only, EPD is the only one that has any kind of civilian oversight. So yeah, sorry, to get to your answer, it would take some effort. I mean, like I said, in the annual report, we have all of our complaints, and in that table at the end, I have in bold type which ones got dismissed and why. And typically somewhere in preliminary investigation, we've been able to figure out which agency is involved, and we forward it along to them. Not every time, but we do try. So it would take some effort, but I mean, I could tell you anecdotally that, but I wouldn't be firm on that information.
That might be something for our upcoming work plan to recommend to City Council.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see Bonnie's off mute. She got something to say.
Yes. So I was just wondering, is there any way that we can also recommend like an additional review board that reviews discipline?
So we can talk about that at our upcoming work plan. I think it. I think it's an excellent topic. Maybe not an additional board, considering we have a couple already.
Okay.
But something.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. And Jeremy, can you please write that in the record? Okay, thank you.
Okay, should I try to move?
I'm all good. Sorry.
Forward? No, it's great. I appreciate questions. It's way better than just talking. Man, just wait till next week. I'll talk a lot. So this slide is boring. Speaking of which, right? This is access to investigations and EPD files. There have been a few questions. I've been in a lot of meetings lately, so this wasn't this group, but I figured it might be helpful to have this opportunity for some learning. And that is, so our access to files and investigations is all set out in ordinance. So I've got the sections there, and I can email these slides to you all, or Jeremy can afterwards. But basically, these are the sections that say we are involved in the investigations, we participate in interviews, we have complete and unrestricted access to complaints and records and information and all that stuff. And so I made a better slide, which is, what does that look like? So what that looks like is we share that database that, all of Cindy's stats that she just showed. I have access to all that information. So that includes complaints, commendations, uses of force, pursuits, risk claims, all of those things. None of them are lovely, actually, never mind. But so, I mean, I literally get to wherever I'm working and I can check in the database. And if there was a use of force, I can immediately ask for video and related police reports and review that and see if I think it needs a deeper look. So we have access to EPD records, files that includes video, dispatch records, police reports, all of that. And while I don't have like unfettered, like I can't just willy-nilly just say, oh, I wonder what that officer was doing last night. Like that would be intrusive and not fair anyway, in my opinion. But if something happened that requires me to ask for video, I get it right away. IA staff is incredibly helpful about all of that. And then for investigations, like I said, we collaborate with IA to make sure that we're hitting all of the steps that we need to hit to get the answers that we can. We participate in interviews, and we can require additional investigation. If it's all closed up and we're about to adjudicate and we're like, oh, should have asked that question, we can send it back and go ask that question. So that is what that access looks like. Common challenges, just issues that come up a lot as far as being able to provide the true transparency, our public records law. Like I sort of mentioned before, public meetings where you're reviewing confidential files can start to sound a little cryptic. So when CRB is reviewing files in a public meeting, they have to say Officer A. They can't identify the officer. They can't give identifying information about that officer. That would be a violation of public records law. And then the other one is actually Chief was speaking earlier. We had a use of deadly force last week. While our office is promptly notified of any of those such critical incidents, and we do respond to the scene, and we are allowed to accompany IA through that scene, we don't have jurisdiction over that initial investigation. That's all in the hands of the interagency team, and the district attorney is in charge of all of that information that's being gathered. So those are two issues that come up a lot for us, and I just thought I'd let you know. So that is where I move into our actual annual report from last year. So again, these are 2019 issues. Seems like a long time ago. I'm going to talk about like public forums and gatherings that we couldn't dream of now. But this is just an overview of the slides that are coming up. So progress and results of 2019. We love body worn cameras. They are required by policy for the duration of police contacts, and we get to review those body worn videos. It helps a lot with, I think, with accurate classification and with finding issues that need to be looked at. We had 3 deadly force investigations in 2019. I believe this has changed in the last month potentially, but I know 1 is still open, potentially 2. I would need to check on that. And then we staffed this billing review board. CRB met 9 times in 2019, reviewed 9 full cases, and heard 7 training topics. The STOPS program report, the first statewide report, was issued in 2019, which of course, like I think a week after I put these slides together, the 2020 report came out. So this is all out of date now, I apologize. But I put the data in there. Disparate treatment from EPD was not found because the results were not statistically significant. But as you can see, there are some results there that are interesting, I thought. But the STOPS data doesn't bifurcate people who identify as more than one race, and STOPS data only includes 5 demographic categories, which is neither of those are I guess, comparable to population data. We did receive 9 complaints alleging discrimination by the police in 2019, and those are all now sent to the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission when they are closed. Yeah, we do community outreach. It's different this year, but for 2019, we held 2 public safety forums focused on the Latinx community. They were solely Spanish-speaking events. We had tabling organizations. Chief came and spoke with an interpreter, did a great job. It was great to have. We invited police department, fire department. Gosh, I need Beatrice here to answer everybody who was there, but basically questions of like, if the power line goes down on my street, what do I do? Do I call? You know, who's safe for me to talk to? And then those are our outreach efforts at a glance. In 2019, again, I'll stress that.
Excellent. I think I saw a question in the chat. Was that you, Silver? What were the 3 deadly force cases?
So there was, off the top of my head, and Chief, do you want to jump in on this?
Well, I'll try. Because it was deadly force doesn't mean that it was
on a person.
It seems like we've had shootings that there wasn't a subject that was shot. So we investigate every deadly force incident. So like, and I'll give you an example. Like this year, and I'm trying to think about 2019. For sure, Mr. Rodriguez is in 2019. November 30th of 2019. And prior to him, prior to that particular incident, I'm trying to think of. Do you
There was,
remember?
yeah, so there was one where there was no person was shot. And then there was also, that was the Charlie Landeros,
Was
January 2019.
okay, right after 2019. So Charlie Landeros, Ilaborio Rodriguez, and then another one where firearms are discharged, but nobody was struck. Like for instance, this year we'll have one that we'll be reviewing where officers went to the door and the guy was shooting at them through the door and we returned fire and he wasn't hit. So it's not, it's anytime an officer discharges a weapon, we consider that deadly force. And so we investigate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Somehow I pushed a button so I can't even see the chat. So for sure, Sean, you're gonna have to let me know if questions come through that way, okay? So again, I wrote this in May, early May, but 2020 and 2021 goals and challenges. So we started work with EPD and city partners to implement an early intervention system that's in progress. So that's using some of this data that we already collect to try to help employees make sure that hopefully identify people who we can help and get them on track before I start investigating IAs on them, right?
Question, is that, so this was written before Campaign Zero took off?
Yes.
So is that analogous to their recommendation along the same lines of using data to identify potential problems before they happen?
Yeah, it's similar. And Cindy and the chief can speak to this also, but we've had the data available and sort of the scaffolding has been there, but we haven't been able to implement it. And so the chief took the initiative in, I think it was April-ish, to start pulling a group together to try to get that implemented.
Excellent.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion obviously is huge in our field, as in every field, but especially with trying to help establish community trust. That is the job of our office. So we are continuing our outreach to establish trust and meaningful community relationships. Inclusive community oversight is part of BLM demands, NAACP demands, Campaign Zero, 21st Century Policing. And this, again, was all before the ad hoc committee was created to focus on Campaign Zero and 21st Century Policing. So I think it's all coming together this year and into next year. Obviously, the pandemic has been a challenge for our office, for every office. I will say our complete numbers don't really seem to be decreasing substantially. We did have to close our office to walk-ins in March, and we have not reopened to walk-in traffic. But we are trying to focus more on communication with the public. We've done a lot more social media activity, traditional media activity. We're trying to get our updates out to people more frequently, especially around the community impact case. And then also coming up, obviously, I guess the chief is not that new anymore, but we do have a lot of new hires. So I think there is a changing culture at EPD that we're navigating. And also in our office, Mark Gissner has been here doing a wonderful job as auditor for years, and he's intending to retire next year. So we're gonna have some changeover in our office as well. Numbers, these are very similar to Cindy's numbers, so I don't want to bore you. I wanted to note about the length of the time period for reporting. So there are a lot of things involved, and I think just because we're looking at human behavior, there's a lot of changes that occur and make things less comparable. So like Cindy said, the incident review was something we came up with in 2016, so that number wouldn't have been included before that. We changed use of force reporting, became much more extensive in 2015, I believe, Cindy, is when we instituted Blue Team. Could have been 2013. My brain is a little fried, you guys.
13.
Yeah, so I will say just the human factor, I think, limits a little bit how statistically constant we can be, but the next slide is a much longer reporting period, so I try to balance it out. As I said, as of November 1st, we were on track for 400 complaints. I didn't check as of December 1st, but I don't feel like it slowed down. Yeah, sorry, those are the same numbers that Cindy showed you, so I'm going to move on. Yeah, so we do have an overall upward trend over the last 9 years. These are 9 years of numbers.
Does that upward trend reflect population, or is it growing faster than population?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have not compared that trend line to population.
As well as marketing budget is the other the other comparison that I.
We did start our community outreach efforts, and Beatrice has been in for almost 4 years now. So I'm going to note that when she came on in 2017, we were at a low, and look what she did.
Mm-hmm. Sweet.
Yeah. So, all right. So these look a little different because what our office tends to do for our reporting of these is we isolate out, instead of just by sub-classification, we look at every single alleged policy violation and which policy was alleged to have been violated. Right? So these are all policies that you guys might recognize, right? There's unsatisfactory performance as part of the code of conduct. There's a specific policy on social security numbers. It's in the POM. You can have fun with that. There's one on report submission. I have pieces covering the right half of that graph, but that's how I break it. That's how we break it down. So that turns into 61 specific alleged policy violations from those allegations of misconduct and allegations of criminal conduct. Some of those are against more than one employee. Yes, some of those are against the same employee. So like one employee could be alleged to have violated performance, truthfulness, search and seizure, all in the same interaction. And those could all be sustained, and that would all be against one employee, but it would be 3 sustained policy violations. So I hope that makes some sense. I know it's confusing that Cindy and I try to present it differently, but it is the same data.
V's got a question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Leah, I'm wondering, thank you for the very informative presentation. So I'm wondering, when somebody filed a complaint with your office, how soon do they get, some kind of response saying, yes, we've received the complaint, and maybe some kind of follow-up as far as like, the progress of the investigations and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you let me know that? And also if there's ever been a complaint that was filed, but they never hear back from you, from your office, I mean, and then, that escalated somewhat, maybe to the CRB or somewhere else,
Sure.
Yeah.
So within 5 days of receiving the complaint, we are supposed to have it classified and pushed over to EPD. Once we have classified a complaint, we send out a acknowledgement letter is what we call it, but it basically says, thank you for your complaint. This is how it's been classified. This is who you should be hearing from next. Please let us know if you have questions. If they filed an email complaint, we will often respond via email instead of via snail mail. What we have found is we do get a fair number of those letters back because sometimes people change addresses or are moving a lot, and so we can't always get a hold of people that way. When we were able to do walk-in traffic, we could handle that with, we'll just stop by and come talk to us and we'll let you know how things go. So it's been a little more complicated this year, but we do try to stay in touch over phone or email. I would say we have systems in place to ensure that people hear back from us. If that occurs that they don't hear back from us, that is an issue we would definitely want to address, because at very least they should be hearing from us or from someone at EPD. So yeah, if that were to occur, if there's complaints about our office, you can always come to our office, but since we report directly to council and CRB, those are the other the other avenues for I guess complaining about me and Mark. Okay, I can't see if there are other questions because people are.
I'm not seeing any other questions.
Thank you, Sean.
Of course, I'll be more vocal about it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so, and then I just wanted to say, yeah, so 11 of these sustained allegations were on one employee over the course of several incidents. So sometimes these numbers they just look a little strange, and sometimes it helps to have that bigger picture. These are, again, the same as Cindy's numbers. So these are incident reviews, inquiries, policy and service complaints, and how they've changed over the last 4 years. And I included 2016 because that's the first year we had incident reviews. I'm realizing those colors are really similar. Okay, next time. And then that's our office when we could still go to an office. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces and I can answer any questions you have.
I was just about to compliment you on your colors because I could actually see them, unlike some.
Okay.
Silver, did I see your hand?
Yes. So I did notice the other day that the banner was taken down. Was that because you're not inviting people to come in?
Partially that decision was made after our office was vandalized in the beginning of the summer. And so I think there may have been sort of a, seeing the word police and a response to that. So we took down the banners so we could stop paying for people to clean off our windows.
There was still some information on there that was both in English and Spanish that was pretty important.
Yes.
So how do we get that information back out?
Right. I can talk to Mark because I know we put some signs on the front door instead of up on the big banner, but I'll see what we have. I honestly, I guess I was in there a few weeks ago, but I was focused. So I will see what we have on the door now. So.
Excellent. I'm not seeing any other questions. Bonnie?
Were those all, sorry, so in that pie chart, everything there was a sustained allegation?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Those were all alleged allegations. These words are all similar. So that was 61 alleged policy violations, and those were all the policies that were alleged to have been violated. And then I actually have a different chart in the actual annual report. It would test my skills to come up with it right now. But it should be, I think Jeremy sent those out, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, so it should be in there which ones were sustained.
Okay, gotcha.
It's in their packet.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. I know, of course you did.
Oh.
Thank you.
Bonnie, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, but I'm gonna wait for somebody else to ask.
I don't think anybody else has any questions yet. If you need a couple seconds, I can think of one, but yeah, you remuted yourself as well.
Okay, so what I was wondering is, okay, so this data that you were able to provide us, you're able to provide it to us because it's aggregate and we don't know who they are. And I guess what I'm getting at is like, so is there any way to get this information a little bit more often and kind of get anonymous information and kind of maybe like say Officer A and somehow not have it be somehow identifiable, so we can see Officer A had 11 allegations, Officer B had all these, and then these are the disciplines that they encountered, and these are possibly the disciplines that they encountered again because they did it again or something like that. Is there any way to do that? Because it's anonymous, right? So we're not going to know, and we can address it through policy.
Yeah, so there are a couple of ways that we report regularly out to the public, and I wouldn't say it's not necessarily aggregate, but we report out all of our open cases every month, all of our closed cases every month, and we do those in two different ways. So number one is the CRB packets, like the agenda packets, like you guys get the agenda packet, and so does CRB, and their agenda packet includes obviously the agenda and the minutes. And then there's also all of the open cases from the previous month, and then the closed allegations are included. We don't always include all the closed service complaints. So those are all in the public packet. That's and it's, I will say, like anonymized. That's probably not a word, but in a way that's we're not breaking the law to release it. And then the other thing we do is a monthly newsletter. Depending on workload, that can be a little delayed. I'm going to be honest with you, especially this year. But that also includes all of the open and closed cases that we've received over the last month.
So with that, would it be kind of like a suggestion where I could slowly start to collect my own information? Or is there any way to kind of say this discipline is attributed to this officer, but this officer being in just my mind, Officer A, and that's it? Is there any way to kind of to start to kind of see that through the information that you're providing, which I will look into? And sorry that I don't already know that.
No, no need to apologize. It's possible. So one of the other governing ordinances for our office talks about how we are supposed to report on trends. And so I can spend some time thinking more about that, because that's the only way I'm allowed, that I see that I'm allowed to include any disciplinary information in the annual report, because we aren't a part of the disciplinary process and we don't comment on it. So we report it in the aggregate because that's not our purview. Sorry, I saw the move. I thought he was going to cut me off. But I can think more about how we can report on trends and do that in a shorter time span.
And that might be something we put on our work plan to ask Chief to elucidate us more and look into, though getting the data will not be searchable in the same way that the auditor has reported it.
And I'm sorry, but I'm also kind of starting to peter off and I have to go to the toilet, sorry. So can we see which policies, I think you already covered this, but can we see which policies are repeatedly being violated specifically? Because it seemed kind of very overview kind of thing, and I couldn't really see like, okay, this policy, this is, you know, something that maybe the officers are just not understanding what the policy is because it's just too vague, so they keep breaking it because they don't understand it.
Yeah. I actually used to include, so like a few years ago, I used to include a chart that said which policies had been found to be sustained, which policies had been found to, unfounded. All of that stuff was included in a chart with all of the policies. Like, it was reported differently is what I'm trying to say. So I took that out because it was always hard to read and we were trying to make the report shorter. But if you take a look at that and you're interested in that information, I'll definitely make a note of that and try to include it again.
Okay, and sorry, where can I find that? Is that some?
That would have been around the 2017 or 2016 annual reports, and all of them are still on our website. We leave them.
Okay, thank you.
We've got
one of the challenges we're going to have getting to where Bonnie's trying to go is, and Leah can speak to this too, is we have some policy violations that are really, really specific and prescriptive. I mean, just really, I mean, and you could, when you read the policy, you would be able to know exactly what that officer probably did or didn't do to violate that. We have so many other policies that are more very general, like performs outside of expectations. And, and that could be a variety of things that officer did that were outside of our expectations that are going to be really hard to drill down to see like specific trend analysis around what that officer did. So it's kind of a blending of really, really specific stuff and then stuff that's a little bit more general in nature. Like for instance, another policy allegation would be a violation of integrity or truthfulness. Well, there's a bunch of different areas where an officer can be untruthful that has nothing to do with the ambiguous nature of the policy and everything to do about the character of the officer. And so that makes it a little bit difficult to really, really get that good trend analysis I think Bonnie's trying to get to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Judgment too. Judgment is sort of a vague policy, but in some cases it really seems to be the right one to apply. So.
Sweet. So I've got Alan and then V asking questions next.
Yeah, Leah and Chief maybe can clarify this. Oregon public records law protects a lot of information, in particular, what happened in the discipline. So while we know that a policy was violated and that discipline occurred, we don't know what the discipline is because that is against maybe you guys, before I speak too far, maybe you guys could clarify that for folks.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, you're absolutely right. Oregon Public Records prohibits disclosure of specific outcomes of discipline for people. It's a privacy issue for your personnel laws. Or what I'm wondering though is if we were super vague and say, of X number of complaints that were sustained, this is the percentage of that received certain levels of discipline. And you can break out the levels of discipline like documented counseling or reprimand, you know, those kinds of things, and keep them in buckets without saying Officer A in this situation got a day on the beach, because as much as we think that keeps Officer A anonymous, there's somebody that knows who Officer A is because they were involved in that situation. And so we have to be really, really careful about that privacy.
Right, and those laws don't just protect police officers, they're actually state laws that protect everybody in the state, any employee, from having that kind of stuff be known to the public. So Bonnie, you can get the types of discipline that were taken and how many there were, but you can't attribute them or get any specifics.
And I think there's enough conversation at the state level. Maybe next time we have Senator Manning back, we can delve deeper into that. So putting it on our work plan for the next couple of years sounds like a really good next step for that particular line of inquiry. V?
Yeah, so this question is really, I think, more for Cindy, if Cindy's willing to answer that now after her presentation. So my question, Cindy, is, are you a police officer? I'm guessing you're not. Are you a civilian investigator, or, you know?
I probably should have given a little bit more of an introduction about my background, and I can do that now if you'd like. I'm not an officer. I've been with Eugene Police for over 25 years, and I've been in internal affairs in various roles for close to 20 years. So that is my that's my role here as the professional standards manager, overseeing internal affairs, policy development, accreditation, our quality assurance manager. So not a cop.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that, you know, some of the criticisms of IA is that, you know, oftentimes they're all staffed by, you know, veteran officers. And then you have, you know, the question of bias, you know, and the effectiveness of the investigations. You know, when you're investigating a fellow officer is it's different than when you have somebody who's unconnected to the, you know, to the force. So it's good to see that, you know, there are investigators who are not, you know, in the force, so that there is no questions of, you know, unbiased, you know, and then aside from you, is there somebody else in the IA? I guess there are 4 staff member, am I right?
Right, there's myself that oversees the unit, and we currently have Sergeant Jason Barrett, who is our IA sergeant. And then Sergeant Williams is our outgoing professional standards sergeant. Sergeant Nelson is our incoming professional standards sergeant. And that role has sort of changed over the last couple of years to take on some additional IA duties to help us with our workload. We used to have 2 IA investigators. We lost one. And over the last couple of years, we've really needed to supplement our investigative bandwidth, so to speak. So we've pulled in the professional development sergeant to help us with that. And then there's Rick Weber, and then we do have, not in IA, but part of my team is our quality assurance analyst. So only 2 investigators.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions jumping out, which is amazing. I think this will be the first time that this group has a chance to end before 8. So we'll move on to closing comments, starting off with you, Amanda. And then Bonnie.
Okay. Sorry, I had done mute. I don't really have much in closing comments. These presentations were really great and super informative. I really appreciate the time and effort that went into them. I did forget to mention in my update that one of our HRC subcommittees was able to meet with the EPD liaisons to the marginalized communities. And that was really great for that subcommittee. We're working on making that a recurring thing. And I really appreciate the time that went into that as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Bonnie and then Ian.
I just want to say congratulations, Amanda, and thank you to all the presenters. And Sean, when you have a moment, if you can, if it's appropriate for this meeting, if you can clarify the whole retreat thing, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian and then Lindsay.
Just wanted to thank both of our presenters tonight. That was really informative, and I learned a lot as well. And something that I forgot to mention during my presentation is I had a really positive interaction with several officers on Friday, the 13th of November. And I just found out that I can do a commendation online for them. The three officers worked in tandem to de-escalate a situation in which a woman who's unhoused, who lives on the street right next to me in front of my home, said one of her unhoused neighbors assaulted her. And the officers just worked in tandem in a really professional way to de-escalate the situation, make sure that all parties involved had their concerns heard, and made it so that everyone could still kind of live safely and shelter in place where they were. So yeah, just kind of like, I can't remember who said it, maybe Lindsay, learning something new every night. Learned that I can send commendations to officers too. So yeah, just really want to thank the presenters for tonight, and much like Bonnie, really looking forward to learning more how to participate in the planning process.
Excellent. Lindsay and then V.
Thanks for the presentations, and thanks everyone for the questions too. I always I learn from listening to you all. I would just like to say, to sort of underscore some of these questions that Bonnie is asking, I think the idea of discipline and transparency and discipline is sort of, it's very difficult, and it's something that I'm interested in continuing to pursue as well, because while I can't see the discipline that does happen, I can see the discipline that doesn't happen when I see certain officers that appear in CRB cases again and again. And so because I'm one of the only people who gets to know their identity, I obviously don't reveal their identity in the meetings, but you can look in meeting minutes and see that I will say things like, this is the third time I've seen this officer, right? And so I can see certain officers over time, and then I can see as they progress through the organization. So obviously, it's not just a matter of transparency of discipline, the problem that I'm trying to solve, but the concern in certain cases that I have that if there is discipline, perhaps it's not sufficient to either correct the behavior or to end the relationship with the officer who is demonstrating repeated bad behavior. So I think it's something that's worth continuing to consider, like not only do we want transparency, but like what is the purpose of why do we want the transparency? And I think the accountability that can go along with that is like part of that. And so I think continuing to explore different ways that we can make sure that it doesn't feel like a toothless process to community, right, is important for the overall legitimacy of the process and for better outcomes. To that end, I'm also a huge proponent of this early intervention system. We have some, like Leah said, some excellent infrastructure already in place with Blue Team, where we're collecting data that other cities don't even collect. So we already have some information to work with, and I am really looking forward to taking a proactive approach. So as I probably often come off as very punitive in these meetings, but really I think there's a lot of opportunity for coaching, for growth, for growing the human resources that we have within police and taking a wellness-based approach for officers, and then systematically promoting people who are doing great work. And so I really look forward to all the opportunities to explore going that direction and not only focusing on policy violations and discipline as like remedies, I guess, is my kind of way of thinking about it, taking proactive approaches and figuring out what are our metrics of success, how do we measure them, how do we evaluate them? How do we promote based on those things? Like those types of things, I think I get really excited about. I think that's kind of the way of the future. So thanks, Bonnie, for your questions and concerns. And thank you all for being here on this late evening.
Thanks, Lindsay. V, and then Chantal.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Leah, for the wonderful presentation. I've learned a lot. I've read before, but it makes a lot more sense when you have, slides that are well put together and, you're able to get questions answered right away. That's amazing. And I'm also very proud that Eugene has, layers and layers of oversight. A lot of cities don't have that. In fact, when Sean and I and Councilor Ye went to the Pride event and staffed the table, we had people that come and one gentleman came and said, I'm from the East Coast, and I don't want to name the city, but he was saying that, they don't have a police commission. They don't have, civilian review board. They don't have the auditor's office. And so this is unique, in a way. So thank you for doing the work you do and for coming here and doing the presentation to inform us, and wishing all of you a happy holidays season. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Chantal, and then Jennifer.
Thanks to all the presenters. Your presentations were great. And I really love what Bonnie and Lindsay had to say. I think transparency is such a hot button topic right now. It's what the community is pushing for. So the more policies we can get to the point where the community feels safe, we feel safe and have a better understanding, I think everyone is just gonna have a better outlook on the system in general. Also, I just wanted to say happy holidays and thank you again for all your comments.
Thanks, Chantal. Jennifer and Silver.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Cindy and Leah. Leah's right. We get to see her a little more often, but there's so much material and so much data there that it's really valuable to hear it multiple times. So I'm so glad we get to see you here a little more often and get to hear from your office. You guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate the very difficult work that you're doing. And let Beatrice know too. She didn't get to come today, but.
Silver, and then Dallas.
So I did want to just touch upon the conversation we had last time at the meeting. I thought we were going to start looking at the chokehold ban again. And I was hoping to have some of that language, at least beginning to have some of that language brought before us today. Not to put any extra work on you, Sergeant Williams.
I think we'll review it at the next meeting. I don't know if Kyle has any of it prepared yet. I did not push him for it because I knew we had these informational things coming up.
And I see that he's probably not on anymore. But I do want to have a conversation before the end of the year, if that's possible, Chief. If we could set up just a 1 hour, this is a conversation we're having about the shooting. Is that something that we can get you and Jeremy and the group to come to?
Sure. Why don't I have Jeremy connect with Holly Matthews, who is the gatekeeper of my calendar, and see if we can find a time to be able to do that.
Are you talking about a special meeting, Silver?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Jeremy.
Well, then that's up to you guys. If you want to hold a special meeting, then just let me know when and where.
I don't know if we can do it before the end of the year, in all honesty. But
I was going to say, if it is in fact a police commission meeting, then that falls to the chair and vice chair to call. So
yeah,
technicality there. So
what is let's run through Dallas's closing comment, and then everybody put some thought into that, either before the end of the year or maybe because waiting till next year sounds like not what you've got in mind, Silver.
No, and it's just a matter of we're working on these policy issues at so many different levels right now, and on the ad hoc committee. I'm on the subcommittee. I've been doing some work with the CSI work and seeing where that money's going to be allocated. There's all these different questions that we have that we can just start to formulate based upon some of the conversation that we can have. And I don't ask for much time, an hour, if that's okay. And that's my only thought before we go.
Thanks, Silver. Dallas and then Alan.
Sean?
Kyle?
Can I dive into just answers?
Sorry, Dallas.
One of those pieces that Silver had mentioned, and that was that policy language that is in process. And Sergeant Nelson's going to have that for you at the January meeting to pick that up and move that forward then.
Okay. Go ahead, Dallas. Sorry about that.
No problem. I just want to touch just real quick. When I think of transparency, from just what I'm getting from the community folk that I know, or the people I know, if someone's in trouble or someone has done something bad, there's, to me, and this is just me, and if I repeat something that you're already doing, it's the same, but there's like 5 levels to me as far as what I'm thinking. One, the first level is nothing, flat out nothing. There's no proof, nothing happened. The guy's free. 2, something happened, but the discipline is just a verbal type discipline that would deal with training and coaching. That's what we do all the time. The third part, something, now we got past the training and coaching, we're at time off, and I'm assuming with no pay. And that could be, there could be some organizations that don't allow, I don't know, but that's what I need to know. And then the next level is the person either resigned or fired. And then after that, worse than that, there's another worse. And this is where you get this transparency. They've done something, they need to be sent to jail. Mm-hmm. Because to me, sometimes being fired is like getting off the hook. It's not, you might have done something that's worse than being fired. You might need to serve time. Mm-hmm. So is that kind of like the level of where it goes? And I don't need that answer right now, but I'm just saying at some meeting, and I don't even know the names, but if you say you have an incident, one of those things I would think has happened, meaning nothing, and the opposite of nothingness is a person spending time in jail. Because as a person who's a civilian, that's what would happen to me. Then on that chokehold, my next question, isn't Senator Manning on top of this chokehold thing in the state level?
Yeah, when he came to talk to us, he mentioned that as one of his priority pieces for this upcoming legislature. So having it prepared here at our level in preparation will just save us some work down the line. So
my question is what Senator Manning, what they're passing to deal with the chokehold on the state level, not what Eugene does now, anyway? It's similar. Nailing down the policy language, I believe, is the next step at January's meeting. Just the specific language. Yeah. And then other than that, often we can talk about all these things. I also want to add that I believe that the police are doing a great job. And I tell them that as often as I see them. Thanks, Dallas. Alan, and then myself.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Cindy. I've heard both of them speak multiple times, and I'm always thankful of what professional people we have working for us. And also, this whole transparency issue, there's a lot of facets to it. One of which is you can be transparent up to a point because there's state laws that prevent too much information or types of information being put out because people have privacy rights, and some of those things that we think are wrong need to be taken up at the state level, not at the city level. Also the amount of information that we get out of the police department that we actually see an IA report, that we see the police auditor's report, and how extensive it is and how much detail there is in there about all the stuff that goes on. And the CRB has information that we get. I mean, it's not at the level that Lindsay gets to see because of the privacy rights issues, but it is amazing how much information that we actually get compared to other communities. As the chief said, our starting point is where people want to get to. And so we do have a lot of transparency, but that doesn't mean it can't get better. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at in terms of policy and police policy reform is around making it better and getting a little bit more accessible. And then finally, just the thing that V said, which is really interesting. I've had other people say that to me as well, or people that don't know anything about Eugene and I talk to about police things, and then we say, wow, we actually do have a police commission. Yes, we actually do have a police auditor. We actually do have a civilian review board. And they're more or less going, wow, when did you do that? We did it decade ago, more than a decade ago. So a lot of that stuff that where people want to get to, our starting point is where they want to get to. Not to say it can't be done better, but I think the system that we have works well and ends up getting at the issues that we want to get. That doesn't mean it can't get better.
Thanks, Alan. So to swing all the way back around to Bonnie's question, I'll start off with you can review the video of the past retreats. They're available online. Obviously, this year is going to have to be a little bit different with us interacting online. Usually, they're very informal discussions about what sort of topics, issues, maybe specific policies, or maybe just problems that we want to get at. And then I know I made the mistake when I was not chair of advocating for some really nebulous things, which as soon as I became chair and I had to solve these problems, blew my head a little bit and I was kind of lost in a drift. So I will make sure to ask, try to get specifically at what folks are looking for, or what issues or problems they want to address that fall within our ordinance and bylaws. As an example, one of the things that I would like to put on our work plan is a bylaws review, because it's been a while since we adopted our bylaws initially, and it's time for an update for those. Another thing would be recommending to ways to improve trust in the police. And then there's a variety of tactics I might suggest on that front. This time around, I think a public comment is also encouraged and accepted at these meetings, though last time around we didn't have any because it's a longer meeting. It tends to be basically a day-long meeting with an hour break in the middle for lunch, in order to make sure we have the opportunity to tackle these things that need to be tackled. For this time around, I think the only way it's going to work is if folks come with some ideas already prepared, because we're not going to be able to chat as informally given the limitations of the technology, and sort of directionally talking over each other too much. So I don't have a whole lot of ideas. I'm hoping to use Family Christmas as a trial ground for preventing overlapping conversations from ruining any conversation. So if anybody has meeting ideas about how to conduct these Zoom meetings
I got the rest of it about that.
effectively without as much formality as we have in these meetings, I am all ears, and I would really appreciate it, because usually we can just, oh, that person's talking, I will be quiet, or make a side comment, though that's not generally encouraged. But yeah, so starting place, looking up the past meeting following up. It's going to be different this year.
Sean, was that retreat what we had at the park when Senor Cleversley made us Mexican food for lunch?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so that was a retreat.
Yeah, retreat. It was also a treat.
It was
a very good
it
treat.
was Cinco de Mayo, wasn't it?
I think it was, and he made us some wonderful Mexican food. Thank you, Senor.
Indeed.
Sean, can I make a brief?
Dallas.
Statement? Just real brief.
Yeah.
When we had the public, there was two people that spoke, and there was a lady. There was a lady that spoke, and she spoke about this. She had this $15 million that was allotted for certain things. Well, she was off and was not given she was not given the response that was incorrect information, and we got it. So either A, we need to make sure that whoever is on the public, that you're telling them to either, we hear you and we're going to be responding to it and you're off, or we respond to it while they're on. But somewhere along the line, I kind of like the idea that when someone's bringing up something like that in the information, I want to make sure that person has the correct information back.
Yeah.
Because now we haven't found anything. Because that person is now still thinking that.
Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. I think it's a really good one. As far as the rest of my comments go, I think I'm going to save them because we just hit a minute over time. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you all have a fabulous holiday season.
Can we give Ian 2 minutes?
I was just waving goodbye.
Oh, you're waving goodbye. I saw 2 fingers.
Both hands now.
Happy Hanukkah.
See you, Ian. Yeah.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
night, Dallas, and bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.